Hi all, thank you all for your comments so far on this series where I'm critically examining examples from Kotov's book, Think Like a Grandmaster. It's a classic book, but fundamentally I'm uncomfortable with some of its emphasis, and I want to continue looking now at the third example given by Kotov, which is a game taken between Flohr playing white and Fine as playing black in Hastings 1935-36 tournament. The first thing I was casually researching was the context of the game, the Hastings Congress, and I quickly looked up Salo Flohr on Wiki. Salo is a shortcut to his name, Salomon Flohr. So he was one of the leading Czech players, according to Wiki, and he became kind of celebrity in his own right. His name was being used to sell cigarettes and perfume, so he was like a modern celebrity at the time. And actually, one of the little details which Kotov neglects to mention, when presenting this game example, is that Salo Flohr had won the Hastings Congress 4 times in a row. That's an unprecedented number of times in a row to win the Hastings Congress, a tournament which every world champion pre-Kasparov, except for Fischer, has played in. So Kotov just accidentally didn't mention that. He picks what I think is the only loss Salo Flohr had in the Hastings Congress up until that year, and this was a loss to the winner, an American, Reuben, who just trumped him by just half a point. So there was a critical position in this game, sure, where Flohr went wrong. But, Flohr, if you look at his games, in this tournament and the previous 3 years, they're highly positional. Flohr is playing even more solid than the London system in certain games, i.e. like D4, Knight F3 and E3. He's playing, fianchetto as Queen's Bishop later in some of his games. He's a very quiet positional player. And it's interesting to consider that not only is Flohr demolished by this kind of tree of analysis idea in this example, but in 3 or 4 of the subsequent examples, he's also demolished by all these variations which would have either crushed him or let him win. And it's only actually at page 176 where there's a mention, what's going on here, I was thinking, why is Flohr not being emphasised for his victories? And why is he always on the receiving end of this kind of brute force analysis? And, on page 176, Flohr is at last recognised for his endgame skill by Kotov. And Kotov writes, apart from the endings of the classic players, I was greatly impressed by the endgame mastery of my contemporary, Flohr. Many of the games which he played in the 30s figured in my notebook of key endgame positions, and pride of place goes to his game against Can White. So Kotov goes over this very, very long game against Can, where Flohr won in 71 moves, and he then says, this example really shows what endgame technique is. It is no accident that Botvinnik has frequently recommended that a collection of Flohr's best games should be published. So maybe, this explains in some way, Kotov's use of Flohr as, this person to batter, with this new brute force method, or this way of thinking like a computer. Well, I think it's time to batter Kotov. In particular with this example, but let's see. Don't just take my word for it. Let's have now a reflection before we go on this roller coaster ride into all these analysis of variations in order to batter Flohr. Before we do that, let's just have some quotations from Kasparov's book, which is called "How Life Imitates Chess." So if we just go even on page 1 on the introduction page. Kasparov is apparently disappointing audiences because, they ask him, does he have a photographic memory? How many moves does he look ahead? And, his humble answers, Kasparov's humble answers is, how many moves I look ahead depending on the position. Shock horror. It depends on the position. During a game, Kasparov writes, I tried to recall my preparation and to calculate variations. My memory was good, but not photographic, etc. But the really interesting thing comes just a little bit later, yeah, where we see this, love triangle of Kotov, Kasparov, and Botvinnik, where Kasparov really lays into this idea of chess as a science, or rather, he puts it in context. He asks, sport, art, or science? And then the answer is sport, art, and science, as if the three go together. So Kasparov writes, if you ask a grandmaster, an artist, and a computer scientist what makes a good chess player, you'll realise why the game is such an ideal laboratory for the decision-making process. A professional player is likely to agree with the second world champion, Emanuel Lasker of Germany, who observed, chess above all is a struggle. According to Lasker, no matter how you define it, the point is to win. Then Kasparov goes on to talk about the artist, Marcel Duchamp. So he was strong and devoted chess player. At one point he even gave up art for chess, saying the game had all the beauty of art and much more. And Duchamp went further and he affirmed this aspect by playing of the game by saying, I had come to the personal conclusion that while all artists are not chess players, all chess players are artists. And it is true that we cannot ignore the creative element, even though we have to rationalise it against it with the primary objective of winning the game. Then we come to the scientific aspect, Kasparov writes. The one, the most non-chess players tend to overemphasise. And I wonder, why is that? I don't think Kotov really helps with his book, for overemphasising the scientific aspect. So people have asked me, do I hate Kotov in the videos I've done? Well, I hate the idea he's portraying, that chess is some scientific calculating game. That's what I hate. Kasparov writes, memorization, precise calculation, and the application of logic are essential. Now, this is very interesting. Kasparov writes, when chess-playing computers first came on the scene in the 1950s, most scientists assumed that the iron beasts would soon demolish any human player. And yet 50 years later, the battle for supremacy between human and machine still continues. And now we come to the really interesting bit. The 6th world champion, Mikhail Botvinnik, my great teacher, dedicated his last 30 years to creating a computer chess player. This is not just a computer that could play chess, which was relatively simple to achieve and already by then commonplace, but a program that generated its moves the way the human does, a true artificial player. So here we have a clarification on Botvinnik's project, which was joked by Kotov that his book was kind of the reverse. The clarification is Botvinnik was focused on developing a non-brute force chess-playing computer, i.e. one which wasn't just using, looking at millions and millions of positions and every conceivable move, but rather this idea of, a computer program that was simulating, a human player, finding the decent candidate moves first that had some logic to them. But Kasparov writes that, Botvinnik's project was a complete failure. Kasparov writes, Botvinnik was an engineer and he discussed his ideas with many scientists, including the legendary mathematician Claude Shannon, who had outlined the design of a chess machine in his spare time. Most chess programs essentially count beans. That's what I really, when I read Kotov, it's like he's recommending a bean counting approach. And in fact, in his examples, which, seem to excel at finding these amazing resources, I would call that more brute force, because there are these subtle, moves he's listing, which are a product really of brute force.